back, everybody, to another edition of the Pitch Blitz podcast. I am your host, as always, Blaze Tambori. The international break is finally concluded, and we have a lot to cover. A lot of action has happened over the last week, 10 days, that I want to cover before all of the domestic leagues get back into their true fashion. And I want to start with the team that not many people have a lot of hopes for this season, and that is Tottenham Hotspur. As we know, Tottenham Hotspur are a struggling side. They pretty much always have been. They're a team that struggles in really any competition that they are in. The Premier League, the FA Cup, Champions League. If they're in the Europa League, they never really happen to do anything crazy. And they're in the news again. This time, it was after their coach, Antonio Conte, one of the most respected international football coaches in the world, kind of ripped into the club after their 3-3 draw to 17th place Southampton. The game, Tottenham was up 3-1 at halftime. 2 late goals from Southampton within the last 10 minutes secured only 1 point for Spurs. So Antonio Conte, obviously, he was pissed off. He was annoyed. The team wasn't really playing up to their standards. And he made sure that the public knew how pissed he was at his players in the post-game presser. When the journalists were asking Antonio Conte about, the game and what he thought and the penalties that were given, Antonio Conte gave his reaction and blamed it on the players. He did do a little bit ref blaming, but for the most part, it was on his players. And he kind of ripped into the journalists and said, "You guys always defend the players. It's the defenders did this. The defenders didn't do that. It's never, the coach shouldn't be fired. The coach shouldn't do this. It's always the defending of the players." And Antonio Conte was pissed off about it. And one of the questions that came up was the uncertainty of Antonio Conte's future at the club. They were sitting in 4th place. They were knocked out of the Champions League early. So a lot of eyebrows were raised following Antonio Conte's answer. The question, the following question after that is, why is it happening? And Antonio Conte then went into the club, and that's when he said, because they're used to it here. They are used to it. They don't play for something important. They want to play under They don't want to play under pressure. They don't want to play under stress. It's easy this way. Tottenham's story is this: 20 years, there's the owner, and they never won something. But why? The fault is only for the club or for every manager that stays here? I have seen the managers that Tottenham had on the bench. You risk to disrupt the figure of the manager and to protect the other situation in every moment. Until now, I try to hide the situation, but now, no, because I repeat, I don't want to see what I have seen today because this is unacceptable and also unacceptable for the fans. The following question. The question was, you saw the fire last week, what has changed? And that's when Antonio Conte said, I said that I want to see the fire, not that I have seen it. That is different. Not only the club, the manager, and the staff, the players have to be involved in this situation because it is time to change the situation if Tottenham want to change. If they want to continue in this way, they can change the manager. A lot of managers. But the situation cannot change, believe me. 3 days later, Antonio Conte was sacked by the club due to mutual agreement. However, I think this was more so Tottenham trying to save themselves in the public eye. No organization, especially when you're a massive club like Tottenham, want negative press, especially when it's regarding your players, or especially when it's regarding the future of the coaches at the club. And so I think Daniel Levy, the CEO, I think he got a little worried once he heard Antonio Conte's press conference, because the proof is in the pudding. The Spurs have good players. The Spurs have a few world-class players. On paper, they should maintain a title charge every year, and they should excel in the Champions League, and they should excel in the FA Cup and the EFL Cup, but they're not. So the question then is, why? They had Jose Mourinho come in, they had Mauricio Pochettino come in, now they had Antonio Conte come in. All three of those guys have either won the Champions League as a player or a coach, and all of them have plenty of domestic league cups under their belt. But every time one of those world-famous coaches goes to Tottenham, nothing gets done. Sometimes they'll qualify for the Champions League, they'll finish in third, or they'll finish in fourth. Sometimes, they won't qualify at all. Sometimes they get knocked out early of the FA Cup. Sometimes they get embarrassed by these smaller Premier League teams. So why are these great coaches coming into the organization and they're not able to do anything? But they go somewhere else and things change. There's a positive atmosphere. There's a positive attitude. And that's something that we have not seen from Tottenham within the last 20, 25 years, easily. And so I don't really think it's a coaching problem per se. I think what Antonio Conte was saying about the players and how they don't want to win and they don't like playing under pressure and they don't like playing under stress, it's comfortable. Yeah, players are going to be complacent and comfortable when the organization that they're under don't push them for more. As long as Daniel Levy gets the money from ticketing and marketing and ad sales and whatever else he gets money from, as long as he gets that paycheck, he's fine. But if Tottenham's not really winning, as long as they qualify for a Champions League spot, he's happy. And so I think when the players see that attitude and they see that mindset from the organization hierarchy, I think that is when that's the difference maker if you want to see results on the field. And a lot of people don't really think that deeply into why a team's not doing well. Maybe it's not necessarily your striker's not able to score goals, or maybe it's not necessarily that your goalie has made several mistakes in the back and that has led into easy goals for the opposition. Maybe it's the front office. Maybe it's the guys that the public doesn't see. Maybe it's them. Maybe they're the ones who are in charge of the atmosphere. So I think this is a Daniel Levy problem. I don't think this is honestly, I don't think this is a player problem, and I don't really think this is a managerial problem. I think this is a front office problem, and if Tottenham don't figure something out from now until the end of the season, we could easily see them missing out on a Champions League spot and missing out on a Europa League spot this year. But next, I want to head over to Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich is another side that has made the public for firing their coach, Julian Nagelsman. After a little over 2 years in charge, Julian Nagelsman is out. Julian Nagelsman took over from Hansi Flick. Hansi Flick had one of the best records as the Bayern Munich coach for a little less than 3 years, so about the same time as Julian Nagelsmann. But the question on everyone's mind with Julian Nagelsmann is he's managing one of the greatest sides in the world with some of the richest history in the entirety of Europe. And when leading his team in the Champions League, he did not lose a single game. They're currently in the quarterfinals, and they're playing Manchester City. They kept 2 clean sheets against Paris Saint-Germain, who have Neymar, Messi, Mbappe, Hakimi, Verratti. And they're sitting second in the Bundesliga. And they've scored 72 goals in the Bundesliga this year. That is the most goals of any team in Europe domestically. Any team in Europe, Bayern Munich have scored the most goals. And it's not even like they're letting up a lot of goals. It's not like they're scoring 4 goals a game and letting up 3 or letting up 4. They've only allowed 27 goals. Their goal differential is absurd. I think what Bayern Munich wanted to see from Julian Nagelsmann was what they've seen in the past 10 years. There has not been a change in a reigning champion in the Bundesliga in the last 12 years. It's just been Bayern Munich for the last 12 years. This season, we thought that Bayern Munich was going to have it in the bag. Despite Lewandowski leaving, they still have Sané, Gnabry. Now they have Sadio Mane, and they got off to a really hot start. Union Berlin, they kind of surprised a lot of people with the success that they were having. But now it's Borussia Dortmund. Borussia Dortmund sits comfortably in first, just 1 point above them. But the two teams play each other this weekend. So I think from a Bayern Munich standpoint, they were just a little scared that they haven't been in this position in the Bundesliga in over 10 years. And I understand the standards and the expectations that an organization such as Bayern Munich will have with current and future managers. But it's not like they were kicked out of the group stage of the Champions League. It's not like they're sitting in third place. They're playing well. They're playing very well. Keeping 2 clean sheets, having an aggregate score of 3-0 over Paris Saint-Germain, who has on paper the best lineup in all of football. But you're sitting in second place just by 1 point from underneath a rival team, I guess if you want to call Dortmund a rival for them, and you're getting a little worried because you haven't been here in a while, and you want change. But what type of change are you going to have with only 9 games left in the season? If it was up to me, I would say Julian Nagelsmann ride it out for the remaining of the season, and then regroup. If by the end of the season, the Bayern board still believe that Nagelsmann is not the guy, then he's not the guy. But to do this almost at the end of March, this is going to put a wrench in so many plans. And I understand, they've just appointed Thomas Tuchel, a German legend of a coach, as their new manager. I think it was a great signing for them. I think he's going to do great things for them, but I think this is still going to disrupt the momentum. It's going to disrupt the tactics. It's going to disrupt how the players play game in and game out. The signings that Julian Nagelsmann brought in, that he promised playtime for. Joao Cancelo left Manchester City in January, 2 months ago, to play under Julian Nagelsmann. Yeah, it was to play in the Bundesliga for Bayern Munich, but it was also to play under the coach that he expected was going to be there for the remaining of the season, because Joao Cancelo's contract was only for 6 months. And so now, he's not going to be there. So now Joao Cancelo is saying, well, look, Thomas Tuchel doesn't even know me, as a coach. I'm sorry, as a player to coach. He only knows me as an opposition. So will he truly get to know me? And when he does get to know me, will it be too late? Bayern Munich have one of the toughest remaining schedules all across the board, from Bundesliga, from DFB Pokal, and then Champions League. So the difference maker for me, and I truly believe what's going to ultimately tell us the likely candidate to win the Bundesliga this year, is going to be this week's game on Saturday, Bayern Munich versus Borussia Dortmund at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. That'll be a good game. Bayern Munich are favorites to win that game. However, we know Borussia Dortmund, they have crazy momentum right now. Bayern Munich do not. Getting rid of their coach. Completely new atmosphere. Alphonso Davies has gone to social media to talk about how lonely he is. So what kind of influence does that play on the players, on the team, on the fans, on the atmosphere at the games, in the locker room? So Bayern Munich, I'm fascinated to see how this plays out for them, and really just the future for Thomas Tuchel picking up Julian Nagelsman's slack 3/4 of the way through the season. In other news, Erling Haaland continues to score goals. It's almost like he wakes up and there's already a ball in the back of the net. In his last 3 games, he has 9 goals. 9 goals in 3 games. Leipzig, he has 5 goals. Burnley, he has 3 goals. And Crystal Palace, he has 1 goal. In the Burnley game where he scored a hat trick and Leipzig where he scored 5 goals, he only played 63 minutes. I mean, the dude is absurd. I've never seen this before in my life. He has 28 goals in the Premier League. He's going to get the Golden Boot. We kind of knew that, in September. But I made a podcast a few weeks ago saying how Manchester City is better off without Erling Haaland. I do still stick to that point that I made, but obviously I'm not going to say that he's hurting Manchester City. I think if City bought another striker, he wouldn't be putting as many balls in the back of the net as Haaland is, but City kind of needed a player like a Harry Kane, like a Lewandowski, like a Memphis Depay maybe even, who kind of plays sometimes as a false 9, who can, come down on midfield and, help possess the ball or help gain back the ball on defense. Nonetheless, though, I mean, Erling Haaland is a beast, and he just continues to score goals. But when he does go through those droughts that we've seen him go through before, especially in this last winter, he scored 2 goals over about 12 games. 2 goals over 9 games. And now he's starting to get that momentum back. He's hurt now. He didn't play with Norway in the international break because of his groin. Will he be fit to play on the game on Saturday against Liverpool? That's a question for everyone, and no one has the answer right now. And Phil Foden will be out for the foreseeable future. He had a appendicitis when he was on international break with England. So I think Manchester City look fine. Manchester City are going up against Bayern Munich in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. And it's Pep Guardiola versus Thomas Tuchel once again. As we know, Tuchel got the better of him in the UEFA Champions League final 2 years ago, or 2 years ago, in that 1-0 defeat with Kai Havertz's goal. And I truly believe that if Pep Guardiola doesn't win a Champions League title in the next 2 years with City, then he could be gone. And if he's not gone voluntarily, the City board are gonna fire him. And I don't want to say fire as in the negative standpoint that has on America or on the world society today. I don't think they would fire him. I think they would mutually let him go. I don't think Pep Guardiola would ever speak about City the way Antonio Conte spoke about Spurs. Heading into Italy, Napoli in Serie A, 19 points clear at the top of the table. They are cruising. Second is Lazio, then Inter, then Milan, and then Roma. Roma have lost 3 of the last 5 games. Their next game is against Sampdoria, whereas Napoli's next game is against AC Milan. So this is Napoli's title to lose. It's practically impossible for them to lose the title. Realistically they could if they lost from here on out, but they still have 11 games. It's plenty of leeway for other teams to catch up, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Juventus, as we know from their point deduction, they're only in 7th place. Atalanta's in 6th. Will Atalanta stay in that UEFA Champions League spot, or will they drop to a Europa League spot or a Europa Conference League spot? Same thing with Roma. Roma's in 5th. It's tight. From 2nd place to 6th place, it's kind of up for grabs. The difference is only 7 points, but like I said, there's 11 games left in the season. Plenty of time for any of these sides to make some inroads if they see the Champions League in their future. Like all of these teams, they all have history and experience in the Champions League. They all have veterans on their sides. And to see, Inter Milan or AC Milan or Roma not in the Champions League, it just doesn't feel right. Didn't feel right when Roma wasn't in it. Certainly didn't feel right when Inter Milan was knocked out 2 years ago in that group with Shakhtar Donetsk and Real Madrid. But Napoli's got this one in the taking. This is theirs to lose, like I said, and 2nd place to 6th place is really up for grabs. Next is Barcelona. They are unfortunately back in the public eye. This time it is quite negative, and it is quite effective. From what we used to see, if Barcelona was in a negative eye, it was usually from Joan Laporta, the president, from something that he did wrong, something that he paid off, and all of a sudden it was just gone, and no one ever talked about it anymore. Well, now that's not the case. Something gets said, rumor gets spread, or a tweet gets tweeted. Why? It's almost like Jean Laporta knows a guy who knows a guy and just quietly puts it under the rug. Well, that's not the case now. Rumor has come out that Jean Laporta paid over £2 million to La Liga referees. £2 million to the head of the referees to influence Barcelona's games. And this is really sad. This is unfortunate because that's not what you want to see. We've seen scandals before in sports with fixed games, with referees who were playing on the other side. But it's different when it comes from Barcelona, and it's different when it comes from the president of Barcelona, and it's different when this has been hid for over 5 years for Barcelona. The controversy now is not only should Joan Laporta be fired, because I believe he should. He broke a rule, a major rule. But what about the players and the success that they've had in the past? Manchester City and Juventus have been in the news in the last 6 months regarding financial fair play laws and their act in violating them. Juventus, the entire board was fired if they weren't relieved of their duties already. Each one of them were fined. The club was fined. And they had a 15-point deduction, which it looks like, ultimately cause them to miss out on the Champions League and Europa League next season. Manchester City. There's rumors, it's alleged, that's all it is right now, that over the last 7 years, Manchester City has allocated their advertising sales money and disguised their money that they paid for players into a different bracket. Which is violating the financial fair play laws. I can't talk right now. Everyone and their mom is claiming how Manchester City should be relegated from the Premier League. Manchester City should be stripped of all of their titles. Manchester City should be fined, £100 million. But then Joan Laporta, this came out 2 weeks ago, that Joan Laporta is paying the referees in La Liga to seriously and significantly influence Barcelona's matches. And it comes out, in a tweet, it goes viral. Joan Laporta addresses it, says that's not true, that's fake. I assure the Barcelona supporters that this is false. We will be okay. And it's almost as if it's no longer talked about anymore. So where's the precedent in all of this? A team is alleged. There's nothing in proof, and the evidence that the Premier League has on Manchester City had over 100, in the first 200 pages, it had over 150 mistakes. 150 mistakes. People want them to get relegated. People want them to strip the titles of all of the players. People want Kevin De Bruyne and Vincent Kompany to be stripped of their titles, and Kevin De Bruyne should be stripped of his Player of the Year awards in the past. And, well, let's go to Barcelona, okay? The team is paying the referees so that they win, so that they have a better chance of winning. Barcelona has had so much success, probably the most success, maybe equally to Barcelona, arguably, over the last 20, 25 years. Why don't we take away, Lionel Messi's medals? Why don't we take away Leo Messi's Champions League trophies? Why don't we take away Messi's, Ballon d'Ors? So where's the precedent? That's a slippery slope. It should be a slippery slope, but it apparently it's not. Apparently it's only okay if some clubs do it. Oh, no, you can't take away Messi's because he had nothing to do with it. Neither did De Bruyne. De Bruyne didn't have anything to do with what Manchester City is alleged of doing. The evidence that is against Joan Laporta today is, from what it seems, is that it's pretty damn factual. There is a receipt that was leaked, and it had Joan Laporta's, tax identification number. It had the amount that was paid. It wasn't all in full. It was 200 grand here, 300 grand here, 600 grand here, 100 grand here, over 2 years. Over 2 years. And nothing's happening. So I really hope for the sake of this sport and the sake of the credibility and truth in the players, coaches, the boards of these clubs, as well as the referees, Joan Laporta should be fired. Joan Laporta should be fined double what he paid these referees. And it's not my place to say, but as far as the players being stripped of medals or titles or awards or trophies, I don't know. It's not my place to say. They had nothing to do with it. If you want to take stuff away from Joan Laporta, go ahead, but that's where it gets a little tricky when you start talking about what should be taken away from the players, because the players really had nothing to do with it, unless it comes out that Messi personally, secretly, had negotiations with the refs, with Joan Laporta. Then that's the problem. But that's not how it is right now. So we will see what happens with Joan Laporta if he stays manager for the coming weeks, months, years. Who the hell knows? But anyway, guys, that was a lot to cover. International break is over. The Premier League is back this weekend. Bundesliga is back on Friday. La Liga is back on Friday. Serie A is back on Friday. And then before we know it, April 11th, Champions League is back. Quarterfinals. A lot to cover. You guys will hear from me by the end of this week. I'm going to put out another post. But just be sure to follow me, subscribe on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. You can find any of my content on Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, as well as Amazon Music and SoundCloud. So guys, thank you once again for tuning in to another edition of the Pitch Blitz podcast. I will see you guys next time. Take care.